Let's... Hey, good afternoon, good evening, and wherever you are in the world, you're very welcome for my Mindful Leadership podcast, where I'm your host, Jason Cooper. I'm a sales strategist, sales coach. I help sales teams deliver better results. In this particular series, it's about insightful leadership, and it's about gifted leaders who employ brilliant and unusual strategies to great effect. And today, my very, I always say very, I have to say it 3 times because it's good for influence and persuasion. So I read in a book somewhere, but it's good empowerment. Today, I've got Chester Elton. So you're very welcome.
Great to be here, Jason. Thank you for the invite.
I'm going to give you a little bit of a bit about you. I'm sure a lot of people already know about you, but you're the #1 best-selling author, organization, culture, employee engagement, and leadership expert. I have one of these for all the people listening audio. They won't be able to see this, but Leading with Gratitude, 8 leadership practices for extraordinary business results. And it's co-written with Adrian Gostick. And we'll talk about that in a few moments, but that's wonderful. You've written, so I believe, 12 books, which is absolutely phenomenal. I haven't even started one yet, but I've got plans to do more than one. You work with you're working with Marshall Goldsmith, who I met last year with my friend Simon Hay, who's also interviewed you. You've had decades of leadership experience, but now as you sort of grow gracefully, beautiful as you are, and handsome, even more handsome than you are for a couple of years ago, you've have an eclectic array of experience. Like there's lots and lots of stuff here, but I'm sure that you're going to fill out the blanks that I've missed here. There's lots and lots of stuff that we can talk about you, but rather than me talking about you, why don't you talk about you? And welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for that interesting introduction. Yes, actually, Leading with Gratitude is actually our 13th book. Adrian Gostick and I have been writing together for 20 years now. 10 years we were with a larger organization where we wrote books on employee recognition and engagement. And then about 10 years ago, we struck out on our own. We are co-founders of a training company called The Culture Works that deals with leadership and culture and employee engagement. And Leading with Gratitude is our 13th book. Our good friend Marshall Goldsmith actually wrote the foreword, which we were very pleased that he did that. And that relationship, being a part of the MG100, has been really a remarkable gift in getting to know wonderful people. And many of the leaders that we interviewed for the book and much of the research was out of that particular MG100 group, which stands for Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches Paid Forward, which is a bit of a misnomer because there's well over 200 people in the MG100 nowadays. So it's kind of fun.
Molly Chang's on there as well, so I believe.
She is. I noticed that you interviewed her. She lives in New York. I'm coming to you live from Summit, New Jersey, just across the river, and I'm a huge fan of Molly Chang.
Yeah, she's very
skillfully, and she's quite a good tennis player as well. I don't know if she mentioned that, but
no, she didn't actually. That's one thing I would have quizzed her on and said, "Tell me something that people don't know about you." So
yeah, she strikes the ball like Serena Williams. She's a champ.
Oh well, then something I won't ever challenge her to do. I'm pretty competitive in most aspects, even though I can't play that well. I won't challenge her. So
good call.
Chester, I really want to know a little bit more sort of behind the scenes of you, really. Sort of tell me about your life to date before you became this global leadership guru. And before that, sort of, if you just sort of snapshot between your sort of earlier days of what you did and then sort of shoot forward to where you are today.
Sure. Well, I grew up in sales, so you'll appreciate that. My father always said, "Look, nothing happens in an economy until somebody sells somebody something." And I actually paid my way through university by selling books door to door, which was
Wikipedias.
No, they were Bibles actually.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes, I did it for 3 summers. It paid for my tuition and housing, and actually a down payment on our first home.
Wow.
In Detroit. I loved it. And it was so funny. One of my favorite sayings is people say, oh, I hate sales. I hate selling. And I would say, no, you don't. You hate not selling. Yeah. If you're selling, you love it. nobody hates selling. Everybody hates not selling. So, so I worked for a recognition company, and I was selling recognition platforms and whatnot. I actually grew up in a media family. So I started in selling TV time, and then migrated to selling these because I love, like you mentioned, you're competitive. I always played a lot of sports, played, rugby and basketball and tennis, and loved the achievement, loved the ceremony, loved the symbolism. And so it was a nice transition for me. And I had great rapport with our CEO, Kent Murdoch. And I remember calling Kent and said, hey, I've just finished this project with a big consulting firm. They have this book all about their philosophy of business. I said, if we became the thought leaders in employee recognition, you'd make my job a lot easier. People would call us. I wouldn't have to cold call them. And I said, thought leaders publish. We should publish the definitive book on employee recognition. It hasn't been written. And he said, oh, I love that idea. Write the book. And as any good salesman, I said, well, I meant you should write the book. I should benefit from said book. And he said, look, you're a smart guy. Figure it out. Isn't that wonderful? And so I played with ideas off and on for about a year, and he called me back. And he said, I've just hired a new VP of communications, Adrian Gostick. He's a writer. So introduce yourself and write the book. And a year after that, after Adrian also grew up in Canada, English passport, grew up in Canada.
Good man, good man.
Good man, yeah, good roots. And we dropped a book on his desk called Managing with Carrots. Carrots, became our metaphor, more carrots, less sticks. This is our little mascot.
I saw that on your one of your videos, actually. It was very good, very entertaining.
Yeah, and fun. And when we speak, we throw carrots. We don't do it as much now. It's a little tougher to pass through the screen. At any rate, and Kent was great. He said, I love this. I say things and they happen. I'm good to be king, right? So that was the start of our journey. We wrote 7 books for that, under that umbrella on the carrot, 8 books altogether. And then the leadership changed. The things changed. We wanted to own our work, which wasn't possible while working. It was possible. They chose not to. And so we struck out on our own. We went into culture. We went into teamwork, leadership, all under the umbrella of how do you create great cultures. And the journey's been wonderful. We've had 5 New York Times bestsellers, 7 Wall Street Journal bestsellers. Our books are in 30 languages. We've sold 1.6 million copies. So it's been a wonderful journey. It couldn't do it without my partner. He's the writer. If you're going to write a book, have a writer. Yeah. And he does so brilliantly. Every time we write a book, his writing gets better and more refined, and our audience gets a little bigger. So hopefully that was helpful.
Oh, that's phenomenal. That's a phenomenal journey. While you're talking, actually, I was thinking about Napoleon Hill, Think Rich, Grow Rich. And I think it's Andrew Carnegie told him to go out and interview all of these wonderful people around the world. And then took him 20 years. I think you did it pretty a lot quicker than that. But it sort of resonated with me on that and how you've done that. And I think in one of your books, you've actually interviewed a whole lot of leaders in terms of, and it gave you the sort of the premise of a couple of your books.
All our books. We have a wonderful database of over 1 million engagement surveys that we mine. We also have developed our own, what we call our motivators assessment. It's a really fun online assessment you can take that says, what are your key motivators in the workplace? And we've had over 80,000 people take that. So as far as a database to mine, it's very rich. And so we go from the data to then what are the case studies or the stories? So who has done this, in a manner of excellence? And that always leads you to interviewing the CEOs and the founders of these companies. And it's really been a privilege to talk to some of the great leaders. In Leading with Gratitude, we spent some good time with Alan Mulally, who was the gentleman that saved the Ford Motor Company. Hubert Joly, who took a big retail chain here in the States, Best Buy, from $1 billion deficit to $1 billion surplus. Ken Chenault, the recently retired CEO of American Express, a global bank, and on and on. Indira Nooyi, who the retired CEO of PepsiCo, who, by the way, was a world-class cricket player and played on the Indian national cricket team.
And probably beat England every time.
Who doesn't? Anyway, so you know, it's really been a wonderful journey in meeting remarkable people. Now, I will tell you, Jason, one of the great, it was really heartwarming for me. One of the great insights was that we talked about leading with gratitude. You know, leaders that really care about their people, that they have an emotional connection to the products and their customers, more than that to their employees. You know, to the people that make it all happen. And what we loved about not only was leading with gratitude a key element to leading and producing great innovation and loyalty and so on. Mm-hmm. They didn't just lead that way in the workplace. They led that way in their personal lives. And so at the end of the book, we have this live gratefully and a baker's dozen on 13 ways to not only, you know, express it in the workplace, to express it in your personal lives. And that was really heartwarming and interesting. When Harper Business bought the book to publish, we were wondering about that part of the book. We really liked it. And as you know, as an author, you don't always get what you want. You know, it's an old rock and roll anthem, right? You can't always get what you want.
I think that's the Rolling Stones.
Right. So he was English, by the way. I don't know if you know that. Anyway, me and Mick are very tight. It is that they love that because it took it from more than just a business book. It made it a life book, and that was very affirming for us.
So did they make it? Have they made it into sort of an academic study? So you can learn from it and grow from it. And because from my point of view, I wish I had something like that when I first started.
Oh, sure.
The top insights go, well, how can I shortcut to get to there and find out what they do so I can just learn from that in a really quick, organic way. And I can go, well, that's probably the best way of doing it. And I think I've always, in my head, I've always liked to sort of give back and help people along their way. And I think that's a wonderful thing. And I know the Marshall Goldsmith feed forward, and I think I've led with that, and I think that's just such a wonderful thing to do. I think it really is. And if I had a hat on, I would take my hat off to you and go, thank you for that. It's awesome.
Yes, well, you know, it's interesting. All roads lead through Marshall.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm a certified Marshall Goldsmith coach as well, and this book was his idea. Mm-hmm. And it was fascinating. He'd written a book. It was a compilation of essays from the MG100 called Work is Love Made Visible. Mm-hmm. And so he gave me a copy of the book and said, would you promote this to your followers? We have a lot of followers on LinkedIn. And I said, I'd happy to do it. I'm a huge Marshall Goldsmith fan, and we've become good friends. And he said, what do you think of the book? I said, you know, I love the book. I was surprised you didn't have an article on gratitude. He said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, you know, with the feed forward process, you always ask for feed forward, not feedback. You can't change the past. You're looking to the future. And whenever you get feed forward, there's only one response, which is thank you.
Yeah.
I said, you know, gratitude is so much of, you know, you give away your stuff. You're always so generous. You know, he's practicing Buddhist. And although it doesn't look like Buddha, that was a bit of a slip of the tongue. And I said, you know, other than that, and I'm not joking that you should have asked me to write a segment. It was a little surprising. And he said, well, you know what? I'm the world's greatest executive coach. You're the apostle of appreciation. Let's write a book on gratitude. And I said, well, are you serious? And he said, yeah. I said, well, we got to bring Adrian in again. He's the brilliant writer. And he said, let's go for it. Well, then he was working on books and so on, and his agent didn't want him, and it got convoluted. Yeah. And we'd already put out all the proposals to all the publishers. And he said, I feel terrible. I can't, I'll write the forward. I'll help you promote it, but I feel terrible. I said, Marshall, it's a wonderful concept. If the publishers like it, they'll buy it. If they don't, it doesn't matter. So don't worry about it. And he was so funny. He said, you guys are the best. You know, you're so gracious. And I said, Marshall, it's a book on gratitude. Like, what did you think we were going to say?
Yeah.
You back down. Come on.
I was thinking of Wayne's World, and they went off into the desert with the lead singer of The Doors. I don't know if you've seen it. And they said, build it and they will come, and write it and they will come, and write it, they will read all the words that you've said. I think that's absolutely wonderful. So that's really cool. Sometimes it comes from some way above in the stratosphere whatever that might be, and it comes and filters back through you. I think that's a great example. I was watching one of your videos earlier on your website, and you was in a conference, and you were giving the carrots out and all of that. So really describe to me what you actually do in these conferences, and then how do you apply that back into the business scenario? Just give it like a swing back onto sort of a sales setting type thing with a culture of maybe a toxic culture, and how do you overcome all of these challenges? That's a long fluted question, I know, but maybe cover a couple of the points that I've suggested in there.
Sure. Well, you know, as always, we like to have a lot of fun. We say if you're not laughing, you're not learning, you know. And so when we present at conferences, again, it's rock solid data. Here's what the data has told us. Here are the steps to building whatever it might be that we are talking about at that occasion. You know, it might be employee engagement, it might be culture, it might be leadership. Yeah. And so we take a look at that and we say, look, here is the data. Here are people that have done it really well. And here are the tools that you can use to do the same. One of the things when we deal with sales organizations in particular, and sales leaders in particular, is a wonderful concept that we flesh out in Leading with Gratitude, which is assume positive intent. Yeah. And I think so often as sales leaders, when, you know, our sales teams or customers bring us problems, we assume negative intent. Yeah. Who screwed up? Who's to blame? How could you do this to me? You've ruined my day, you know, kind of thing. As opposed to where in Duranoy from Pepsi, she said, look, when you assume positive intent, it changes the whole tenor of everything. What it does is it allows what Alan Mulally said so brilliantly. He said, we have a problem. You are not the problem. So let's solve the problem. And once you've got a sales organization that is all about solving customers' problems, and when something goes wrong with your product or service that causes a problem, let's all jump in and solve that problem. Mm-hmm. You're not assuming that people are coming to work wanting to screw up. You're assuming that people are coming to work wanting to do a good job, mm-hmm. and along the way they make a mistake. We start the book off actually with a brilliant example, and I'm sure you've got a can of WD-40 in your house.
No, I have this thing called Focus. It's the same thing. We do.
There's no substitute for WD-40, Jason. Don't you ever say that. And it's interesting. The CEO of WD-40, a dear friend of mine, Gary Ridge, an Aussie living in San Diego. That's a delightful combination. You know, the WD-40 actually stands for Water Displacement 40th Formula. Yeah. So there were 39 editions of the formula that didn't work or not as good as they wanted. It took them 40 tries. So you ask yourself, were there 40 mistakes or were there 40 learning moments? And so at WD-40, they say, look, we don't make mistakes. We have learning moments. Let's learn from the mistake. Let's all chip in. Let's solve it. Well, that creates a culture, whether it's, you know, your organization or your sales team, where you're safe. Mm-hmm. You know, you make a mistake, you take it to the team right away. Let's solve this problem. You know, it's not about how is this going to make me look? Am I going to lose my job? Are people going to ridicule me? It's all about, hey, thanks for bringing it to us. Let's figure it out. Let's solve it. Let's move on. Yeah. And, you know, Gary, you know, since the last recession in 2007, 2008, he's taken WD-40 from a $280 million company to a $2.8 billion company. So you talk about sales and growth. Where does it start? It starts with the leader, and it starts with, you know, this well of gratitude that says, look, we're all lucky to be here. We should all be grateful for what we have. How do we make it safe for us to innovate and to serve? And let's assume positive intent about people, about each other, and move on. It's really it's so obvious, Jason. You know, we call it, you know, it's common sense, uncommonly practiced. Because many of us grew up in an era where it was command and control. It was do as I say, not as I do. Yeah. You know, kill what you eat what you kill. You know, we've progressed, you know, as business people and as humans. Not all, you know. Ford Motor Company was a brilliant example of a very toxic culture that became a very positive culture. WD-40 had a good culture that became an extraordinary culture, and on and on.
So yeah, just a question while I was thinking of it is just so as imagine. I'm saying this from experience. Actually, there's a big financial institution over here that I've worked with, but the some of the leaders have been there for 25 plus years, but they've sort of got stale,
right?
And haven't really moved. They haven't really gone anywhere, but they're stuck in that sort of old-fashioned 1980s approach. But they're sort of filtered down because the sort of the air of communication that they have is sort of negative connotations. You say to your kids, "Don't run," and what do they hear? They hear run and run faster. So when the language and the communication filters down through to the organization, this is a big financial, and they are a sales organization. How would you approach that in sort of in a good modern approach to this?
Well, I think this is where executive coaching really is invaluable.
Yeah.
And it's getting a hold of those leaders and showing them a better way, getting them to commit to a better way, and having stakeholders along the way to hold them accountable.
Yeah.
The old school was, if you got an executive coach, it meant that you were halfway out the door. This was the Hail Mary to try to save your career.
Yeah.
Now, if you got an executive coach, it's like, hey, how come I don't have an executive coach? It's an investment. And I think that's where it turns around. It was funny. Marshall and I were talking just yesterday, and he told me the story of an executive in the financial industry. He said, he'd worked really hard for 42 years so that his kids didn't have to.
Yeah.
That I invested all this time in making all this money to give it to my kids, and I expected my return to be good kids. That they'd be good and happy kids. He says, and what happened is I never spent time with my kids because I was always working to make all this money. I gave them all this money that they never had to work for. He says, we have a horrible relationship, and they're bums.
Yeah.
And so, that's where an executive coach can say, look, what's your end goal? If it's just to make a lot of money, then don't expect to have a great family.
Yeah.
You have to, it's not just where you spend your time, it's where you invest your time. Spending is short-term, investing is long-term. So to keep things in perspective, in the foreword that he wrote for our book, there was one line that I've reflected on hundreds of times. And it goes like this. He says, whether a janitor or a billionaire, the one thing we all have in common is we all want to be happy.
Yeah.
And, it's really interesting. I think you and I can agree that some of the most happy people we've ever met aren't CEOs and billionaires. They're good people that have their priorities right. They provide for their families, and they teach their families wonderful principles on how to be happy.
Absolutely.
And, while I am the product of my parents, my kids will be the product of our parenting.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, do I want them to be extremely wealthy? Well, in one sense, yes, so they can take care of me.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
More than anything, I just want them to have happy and fulfilled lives.
I think that's absolutely wonderful. And everyone that I've spoken to in the last 3 podcasts have said all exactly the same thing. It's you work hard and you work yourself to death, but you never see your kids that you want to. And it's so important. Like my kids are in the other rooms. I've told them to go away, but they'll be back. But it's so important to see them nurture. It's so important to take them to rugby as I do with my son. It's so important. Like last night, I took them to soccer or football, and to see those moments. And that's probably why over the last 5 months, a lot of people have sort of reevaluated themselves or have a little bit more connectivity because they're now working from home. How do you see that working with the leaders that you're working with, and how do you have you seen much change in them?
A tremendous reset, no doubt about it, and that I think will reverberate for generations.
Yeah,
I live in a city that is a commuter city into New York City. Well, the commute is death.
I wouldn't want that.
It's 3 hours a day on average, an hour and a half in, but you get in, you take the subway and so on to get to your desk, and an hour and a half back. Well, you take 3 hours out of your day every day. I mean, think about it, it's 15 hours a week.
It is.
That's a lot of time. Now, unfortunately, what's happening for most people is they're just filling that time with work.
They are, yeah.
There are those people, though, that, you know, again, assume positive intent, right? Where that said, look, you're homeschooling your kids. Maybe you're taking care of an aged parent or whatever, and you've got to be careful. Where companies are becoming much more forgiving. And there are a lot of people, particularly in my town, that say, look, I hope we never go back to New York City. Not that the city isn't wonderful. It's just that the commute has never been, you know, it's not unicorns and rainbows getting on New Jersey Transit, you know, heading into New York City. So this idea that I can start a little earlier, I can quit a little earlier, maybe I can work a little later when the kids are asleep, as long as I get my work done and I manage my work and my hours, if hours, you know, make sense, then it creates a lot of bonding time. You can eat breakfast and dinner with your kids, and you can go for a walk in the neighborhood at lunch, and on and on. So, you know, there is the advantage of the community when you're at work, and then there's the advantage of being at home. So I think there's going to be a lot of reset. I mean, look, you're interviewing me from Ireland. I could have jumped on a plane and flown to Ireland and stayed overnight, and we could have met and had a face-to-face, and it would have been wonderful, and maybe have a couple of hundred people in the room. Instead, we're doing it via Zoom, and when we're done, I can go down and play with my grandkids. You know,
happy days, yeah.
So I think that we're going to find, you know, it's gone one way to the extreme from the other extreme. We're going to find a middle ground. I think what you're going to find is a lot of people are going to be working from home like 2 to 3 days a week, and no one's going to bat an eye.
It's I've been doing that for a number of years, so I'm quite used to it. So I don't mind the isolation. I quite like it in some respects because I've learned to do it. But all of these people that have been, as you say, been spending 15 hours a week in traffic and whatever else, and getting stressed up and wound up, then they hit the office and they shout at people because they're so stressed and all of that. I think now they're probably a little bit more calm. But it is good to have a flexible working relationship, but is the human interaction between people. It's wonderful to have this, and I think it's incredible. But what might be missing is the camaraderie, the everyone getting together and doing the big seminars, but also doing that within sort of a end of month, hitting your targets and all of that sort of stuff, and celebrate. How do you perceive, how would you think we can work this out and make it a bit more fun, a bit more camaraderie and more connectivity, but it is but sort of lowering it down a little bit? So do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, there's no substitute for in-person. There's no question. And I miss the human contact. You know, I lived in Italy for a couple of years, and so hugging and kissing and slapping, you know, I miss that immensely. And you know, if there's one thing I mourn, it's that. It's just human contact.
Yeah.
Having said all that, I think, you know, the solution clearly, once a vaccine comes out that people feel comfortable with, and we get enough people to take it, so that we can reach those levels, we will gather again. In the meantime, I think there's going to be a lot of salespeople where they're going to say, look, let's just Zoom. You know, let's meet when we can. Let's Zoom. Listen, I remember selling media time in New York City when fax machines came out. This dates me a little bit. And we kept, our company said, nobody faxes a proposal to a buyer. Nobody. It's all in person. I thought, you know, you're being silly.
Yeah.
Because I can fax over a proposal, get on the phone, talk to them through it in 15 minutes, as opposed to taking 2 hours out of my day to sit down for 5 minutes with the buyer to do the same thing. You know, it was really short-sighted, and I think that's really what's going to happen here. You're going to find a balance. You're going to meet in person when it's appropriate. You might be able to do a lunch, do a dinner, go to an event, and for the most part, the immediacy, the ease of it, the efficiency of being able to jump on a Zoom call, do some demonstrations, do some share screens, show some product demo videos as the technology just gets better and better.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you do that? And why wouldn't your clients even demand that?
Yeah.
Say, look, Jason, lovely to see you. Not going to happen. I can give you 30 minutes on Zoom, or nothing. What's it going to be? Well, you're going to take the 30 minutes, obviously.
I was thinking of a wonderful thing, actually. Someone else that shared this experience the other day is to make it a little bit more interactive. Because we got Amazon here now, I could actually send you some chocolates now, and it'll knock on your door, and it'll be personalized with your name on it. It'll say, Chester, here's a big bar of chocolate, if you like chocolate, or to know what you do like, and say on a Friday, just give you a gift like that to say, my appreciation. I know you love your chocolate, or you love your I don't know, whatever it might be. So you can make a personalized gift, especially when people are being grateful and they've worked really hard, and there's this element of trust that we're working hard in a remote sphere now, but you can actually give a bit of gratitude back that way, which I think is phenomenal. Almost instant.
Listen, there's always a way. You know, and no one, the most creative people on the planet are salespeople, right?
Yeah.
They send a little something in the mail, you know, singing telegrams or whatever. I mean, you make it fun. And like you say, you get to know people. And those simple expressions of gratitude, we talk about it all the time in our work, is random acts of kindness. You know, set a goal to, we had a wonderful story of Chris Hadfield, a Canadian astronaut who was the commander of the International Space Station years ago, and 6 months in a tin can, right, with 7 people, 3 cosmonauts, 3 astronauts, and the Canadian in the middle, and they had a phenomenally successful tour. So much so that NASA studied what was different, because you prepare people basically the same, right? Here are all the rules. Here's how you fix it. And of course, when you're in space, you obey all the rules. All this cowboy stuff you see in the movies, all those people would die. The movie should be 5 minutes long. Oh, let's try this. Okay, we're all dead. And the thing that was really interesting that keeps coming back in all our work is that he said the difference between our crew and the way we were trained, it wasn't that we weren't smart. It wasn't that we obeyed all the rules. We did. He said it was one unwritten rule that we had, and it was simply this, that each astronaut had to perform a random act of kindness for every other astronaut every day. Now, it was never anything grand. It was, I'll clean up. Let me cook the meal. I'll clean the equipment. Let me help you with those calculations. He said what the message was, though, was that we're all in this together. I care about you. You're on my team. I'm cheering for you, and I love you. And he said, because of that, we never had a heated argument. We never had hurt feelings. It was just all about how can we as a team do better and support each other. And it all came back to a simple random act of kindness. Now, that's missing in so many business courses in business schools around the world. Take care of your people, and your people will take care of your customers. It's a very simple formula, and it works. That's such a lovely, wonderful thing, and you describe that so eloquently, and it makes perfect sense. And I wish a lot of other companies around the world could be like that, but also internally and within their family life, because one small gesture, whatever that might be, it's just wonderful. Even your children, as how you effectively can communicate to them, just to make them empowered. Like last night, I went to my daughter was playing football, soccer, and my son was playing first time ever playing football, but he didn't like it. He had a bit of a strop on, and I could have shouted at him. I could have just, I said, look, do what you want to do. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. But if you do want to do it, that'd be wonderful. But he just watched, and then he just ran around the pitch a few times, and he got his exercise that way. My daughter was just playing here and there and everywhere, so that was good. But it's the time, and it's the time and effort that you experience, and it's the experience that you'll remember forever and a day. Well, sure. And to your point, what do you want them to remember? That my dad was always yelling at me, or that when I went out with my dad, I loved being with my dad?
Yeah.
I mean, it's the two extremes. You know, I know we're coming up on our time here, and I put in the chat box a wonderful website. It's leadingwithgratitude.info/free resources. So, you know, you can copy that and paste it. It's our website on our book, Leading with Gratitude. Everything we've talked about, you know, whether it's in sales or whatever business you're in, such a key component to a healthy culture. And that website, actually, we've put a bunch of videos. You can download the first chapter and the foreword from Marshall Goldsmith. encourage you to follow me on LinkedIn. We've got a wonderful hashtag Find Your Gratitude. I post a photo every day of something I'm grateful for. We get wonderful responses on that. And we have the gratitude journal, which is our monthly newsletter. So if gratitude is important to you, or you want to incorporate more gratitude in how you lead, how you sell, how you live, this is the roadmap to a life of gratitude, not only at work, in your life. You know, we say, look, leading with gratitude is a better way to lead. It's also just a better way to live. And
I'm an avid reader, so it will be on my bucket list of many things to read. And I will cover some of those books as well, because I love reading anyway. An Audible as well. I plug in all the time when I have free time or run or exercise. So that's absolutely. I've actually got a cheeky question before we wrap up, actually,
sure.
and it's based on your books, and it's based on everything that you do. But the question is, how do you find time for your own creative space to think of all these wonderful ideas? But what do you do when you do that? What is your creative thoughts, or where do you take yourself to do all this creative stuff?
You know, I just surround myself with really interesting people. And, you know, we do a lot of podcasts, we do a lot of live shows and so on. And it's always interesting for me to like talking with you, and it stimulates curiosity. I also I'm blessed to know a lot of authors, and they send me their books.
Oh, wow.
And I think the thing more than anything in the creative space is, don't just read business books, you know, read interesting books. Right now, I'm almost through a fascinating book by Jane Goodall. And it's called Reason for Hope. She's the one that did all the work with the chimpanzees in Africa, and so on. And it's her life story, and it's fascinating, and it's inspiring. And you know, I'm a man of faith. I read my scriptures. I think, you know, you can read stories again and again and again, and those reminders and solidify that. And I think it's very important just to contemplate, or to take time to meditate, whether it's your prayers or meditation. And we have a wonderful ritual that helps with my creativity. At the end of every day, my wife, and who's ever in the house at the time, if it's our boys or a visitor, we say, what are 3 things you're grateful for?
Yeah.
And we list 3 things we're grateful for. So, you know, create a space where you can be curious, where you can read. And again, read fiction, read, you know, science fiction, read business, read biographies. Be curious and surround yourself with interesting people, and you'll be okay.
That is incredible. Thank you for that insight. I always like to ask those questions right at the end, because I really want to find out how people do what they do, and what you do is your creative space. So the more I know, the more I learn, and the more I learn, I can give back to other people as a gift, say, well, this is what some wonderful people I've been speaking to do, and to give that golden nugget to someone else, and make sure that they give that golden nugget to someone else, and so on and so forth. It's how you, it's a thing called transference, so of communication. So if you do the right sort of communication to someone, like you build a big smile in their face like yourself. So that's wonderful. So I appreciate that. Look, Chester, it's been both educational and extremely inspiring today, and you've been wonderful. And I wish you all the happiness and success for the future. And how do people find you? I know you gave a little bit of nuggets and your books and stuff like that. And any other sort of curious way that people can find you?
Sure. Follow me on LinkedIn, a great place. Sign up for our monthly newsletter, the Gratitude Journal. ChesterElton.com is my website. A lot of fun stuff there. And leadingwithgratitudebook.com is a great place to find it as well. So lots of places. And, you know, if you want to see some fun videos, you can always just, you know, search Chester Elton on YouTube. There's a lot of fun stuff there.
I've been on there and I've watched a few of them. So that's absolutely incredible. Thank you, and have a wonderful day. You've been listening to the Mindful Leadership Podcast. Just to let everyone know, you can actually get this on audio. You can get it on Spotify, iTunes, and there's a whole flurry of other places that you can find this. I hope you enjoyed this. And I know Chester did, because he got a big smile on his face. So happy days. Thank you again.
You bet. Take care. Cheers.